Yeah, I think anybody would say this who's ever written a memoirs is that you don't actually think your story's that interesting because it's just what you've done, isn't it? So for all my life, I've just done music stuff, and that's how I describe. People say, "What do you do?" And I go, "Oh, I kind of do music stuff." And then people say, "Were you the first person to interview Nirvana?" And you go, "Yeah, I did that." And they go, "Wow." You go, and to me that was like not a big deal, you know. But if I met somebody who did the first interview with Elvis or the Beatles, I'd be going, wow. So then I realised it's all about context, isn't it? You know, and then maybe your life is a bit more interesting than you remembered it. I mean, because I'm from the north, I don't think my life is any more special than anybody else's, you know. So what I did actually with the memoirs, it wasn't I did try not to write it as a me kind of book. I tried to write it as a generational book. So. And anybody in my generation, or anybody in any generation who's ever been completely obsessed with pop culture, could understand that story. So in a way, I'm like the narrator of a generational memoir. That's how I kind of did it. So all the stages I go through from, well, punk's a pivotal moment, but glam rock before and all the way through to now, I was kind of hoping that people come on the trip and they go, yeah, I felt that, or I didn't feel that, or I remember when that was happening. So it's kind of weirdly like a 50-year history condensed into somebody's life story. Well, it's going to be the 70s because of my age. I think with pop culture, when it's at burns its bright is when you're a teenager or pre-teenager, because it changes your life. You know, I mean, music now, to this day, I still love music, and I'm always hearing things that I love as much as I ever did. I'm not one of those people who think pop culture stopped when I got to 27, like a lot of people did. You know, people I grew up with now go, music nowadays is just a load of shouting. You go, you grew up with punk. Well, that's it's always been a load of shouting, which is what's great about it. But it doesn't change your life. You know, there's a brilliant band now I'm totally into called Mouthfuls. It's a young band, kind of gothy. They're going to break out pretty big later this year. They're mega. But they won't change my life, you know, because I've already done all those bits. But I can still love their music. So there's a different relationship that you have with the music, and you can still get completely into the music, completely obsessed with the music, but it's not going to change you as a person because you've already got your own trajectory. But we're in the 70s with glam rock, and then especially with punk rock, I was told. I think what I realised as writing the book was in a way that punk didn't really change our lives in a weird way. We were already there. We weren't dressed like punks. We didn't even know what punk was, but we already had that level of outsiderness and dissatisfaction that when punk came along, it just completely chimed with us, you know. Then the other secondary message that came out of punk was anybody can do it, which was the revolution of punk, really. I think like a lot of people that came out of my world, you just went on your own trajectory. You know, there was people you liked and there's music you liked and there's people who did cool stuff, but you never wanted to be anybody else. It just became your own version of it, really, you know. So, and there was a lot of characters as well. There's been a lot of people I've worked with, done stuff with, been colleagues with, been in bands with, been on newspapers with. But often it's a solitary journey, I think, being, for want of a better word, an artist or a writer, whatever. You are pretty much on your own, doing your own stuff. I mean, that's what most writers, when I meet writers, you think they got this kind of really cool life and all they do is sit in a room on their own trying to think of cool stuff to write. It's not, I mean, it's good. I mean, luckily in music, you can still go out to gigs, you know, so you still got like a social life, but people are purely 100% writers. They're absolutely just live inside their heads, don't they? And I can switch from one to the other. But I mean, every day I think I'm so lucky, you know, I've done this all my life and I've actually got away with it. You know, it's like, I've never had to have a job and I've always managed to like somehow struggle along in my own world on my own terms, which I think is the ultimate victory, really. You're lucky to have that life, really. There's quite a lot, actually, of people who should be better known than they are. You know, like, you know, the Manchester scene, there's bands like World of Twist, they should have been massive. You know, they should have been up at the level of Pulp, but it just didn't quite happen for them. And I've seen that, you know, when I was a kid, I used to think that all the best people got to the top because you never realise things are outside the top 40. And when I start reading music papers, it's full of bands. I go, wow, well, who are these? You know, the bands had no chance of having a hit, who sort of played long tours to know people. And then I didn't realise that I would actually spend my whole life being one of those bands, you know, like on the outside, a cult band. And then you realise that music, when you're a kid, you just think your music is the top 40 or the top 10 or whatever. You don't realise that music is a very wide thing. And there's loads of near misses and people who should have made it. And then people who do make it, and they look completely surprised when they do make it, like Nirvana, I know Kurt Cobain had a plan to make it, but I don't think he ever realised he was going to make it to that extent, and I don't think it actually ultimately did him any good either. Well, with Nirvana, so I did the very first interview. So I rung his mum's house up in Washington, in Aberdeen, in Washington State. I remember his mum shouting to come down the stairs because somebody's on the phone from England. It's quite weird, isn't it? And then 6 months later, me and Ian Tilton, the photographer, went out to New York to do a piece on Nirvana, who was supporting Tad on this tour, this Sub Pop package tour, the small club tour. So we went to the hotel, and we went to the flat they were staying the night before to meet them. We said, "Look forward to the gig tomorrow. We're going to do the interview. Should we do it here or all that?" And then we looked at the PR and said, "We're absolutely knackered now. We're a bit jet lagged. Can we just go to the hotel and just dump our bags?" And he said, "Hotel? There is no hotel. You're staying here." So we stayed in this flat about the size of this room, which was about 10 by 10. With Tad, who are huge, big guys. They're like big bears. There's about 5 of them, 4 Nirvana, a 4-piece then, 4 Nirvana. And me and Ian squashed on the floor back to back, and Tad was snoring like crazy. For 4 days we were in there. I mean, at first it was like, oh God, what a drag, we don't even know these people, and we didn't have a sleep bag. I just slept under my jacket with me rucksack as me pillow, and that. But of course now it's become like a really cool story, hasn't it? And I interviewed him there as well. We went to see the gig. They played Maxwell's in Hoboken. There's about 30 people watching. The gig is actually on YouTube. I remember somebody filming the gig at the time. This is 1989, and I thought, why is somebody filming this? I mean, no one's ever going to be into these bands. I mean, all these bands that I wrote about got big. I don't claim I ever thought they're going to get big. I just really liked them, because I think to be a music writer, you can only write about what you're into. I'm not A&R. That's a completely different job, isn't it? I can't guess the future. I just thought Nirvana, wow, that's mind-blowing. Gig's amazing. They trashed all the gear, stuck the guitars through the roof. And then we went and we helped to get the gear in and out in the flat and everything, interviewed him in the flat. Then Ian Tilton on the last night got run over by a bus. So I was right next to him, this bus. I could see the bus coming, the pouring rain. He was ahead of me, go, whoa, whoa, stop. And he didn't hear me. And he got smacked by the bus, went flying in the air, hit the floor, really messed his leg up. We had to go to hospital. And he said, "Can you walk on crutches? We've got no beds." So we had to hobble him back to the flat. The Nirvana running out getting cheese sandwiches for the last day before we got the plane back. So that was a pretty hectic trip, that one. I don't really care what people think of me. I mean, that's another thing you learn from punk, because you couldn't care what people thought of you, because some people just think you're a complete clown and some people think you're a total genius. I don't care. It does not matter at all, does it? Because you can only, I always say that when, people always worry about what they look like. Should I be wearing that? I go, there's a mirror. And if it looks good in the mirror, then it's right. And if whatever else thinks is absolutely irrelevant, isn't it? In 100,000 years' time, none of us wouldn't matter whether they've existed or not. No, we're all going to disappear. It does not matter at all, does it? And once you lose that fear, then life becomes a lot more exciting. Well, I've done it before and I really enjoyed it. I did the Goth tour, which is where the memoir started, because we talk about my life in music. So I'm really looking forward to going out there to all these places across the UK and Ireland, and actually maybe in Europe and America as well, just to talk about the book and to talk about music, and also to meet all the people who turn up, because I think a lot of people come to something like this. They're kind of similar kind of people, they're kind of music fanatics, aren't they? So the evenings are entertaining for me, as hopefully they are entertaining for the audience. And plus part 2 is an in conversation with other fellow travellers as well. So each night we'll have a different guest from the punk and post-punk eras who've lived sort of parallel-ish lives, so that'd be interesting as well to find out. Because I think one of the most interesting things when I wrote the book was to realise how naive we were and how far on the outside we were. And outside, London, possibly Manchester, that was the same experience for everybody. And that's another reason I wrote the book, is that for most people, most punk books are from the inner circles. So the people who hung around at Markham Vivian's shop, people who completely love Bowie's Starman on Top of the Pops and totally got it. They're all about 2 years older than me. But I was slightly younger and I didn't really get, I love Starman by David Bowie, but I didn't get the cultural connotations because I was about 12 then. And I didn't get that there was cool glam and uncool glam. I just loved it all, So, and I lived in a town that was Blackpool, which is quite an odd place to come from, really. So it was kind of on the outside of the outside. And that small town experience, I think, is key to the book, really, because I think 99% of the people whose lives were changed by punk came from similar places where you would get beaten up for having short hair, and you kind of were into this thing, but you didn't know what it was. You couldn't get the stuff, you couldn't get the clothes, you had to make your own clothes, go to second-hand shops like Oxfam and get stuff, pierce your own ears with a compass, all that kind of, it was, when people talk about DIY, it really was, but it was a necessary DIY because you didn't have any choice. You couldn't go into Blackpool and buy a punk outfit and 20 punk records, and you were getting everything in drips and drabs, pre-internet. You were trying to understand something. You couldn't Google search it and get the answer. You had to work it out for yourself. And I always think at the end of the day, punk was like 1,000 questions chucked out at people, and it was up to you to find the answers. So hopefully I found the answers. I think you could do it anywhere, and I think it's easier now with the internet because you can find people, get in touch with people, you can find fellow travellers. You can also find people who help you as well, mentors or people who do stuff. You can just get in touch with them on socials, and they don't always come back to you, but often, sometimes they will come back to you. So you can find people to help you. Also, I'm a true believer in that punk rock thing. You don't have to be that good at it. You just do it because if you want to do it, you just do it, and that's the only thing in it. So I always remember our first gig, when we thought the Machine Head's a guitar, you just put them in a row, and we're so out of tune, but we didn't know anything about being in tune. We didn't know you meant to tune the strings up. We played for 10 minutes. It must have sounded absolutely awful, but it was pure in distilled spirit of punk. We were terrified of going on the stage, but we did it anyway. We were only 16, the drummer was 13, 14, and we dared to do it, and I think that's what's really important in message of punk. So, but expecting to have a career out is different. That's a whole different ball game. But just doing it anyway. I'm a believer that anybody can create art, and just create art for your own soul. Just do it to feel good. If you get paid for it, of course, that's mega on top of it. But it's not the be all and end all of the whole thing, because if you think that's going to result in heartbreak, it's pretty tough to get paid for stuff. And also, why should people indulge in your thing? I think that about the music. My bands, we've always been a cult band. And life would be a lot easier if we got really big. But then why should it? Why? People don't owe me a living. I have to get on with it, don't I? So I think that's important. And the other thing is, I always think writing is, don't write the first paragraph first, because you'd be sat there trying to come up with the killer first line. Just start writing. In 5 minutes, you'll find the flow. First, like playing the guitar, the first 5 minutes is a bit stiff. And then you just find the groove and the flow. And then you're away then, aren't you? Then you can go back and finish it off and edit. Yeah.